All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to Brass Tacks Hard Facts live Wednesday night. And tonight we are joined by Ray McCormack from the FDNY. We're going to talk about some water mapping. Before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping things. If you get cut off at all, we do archive this and it will be on our YouTube channel within 24 hours. So don't worry about it if you miss it. If you're watching this live and you're at the firehouse, you catch a run, same thing. You can go back and watch it later. The other thing is kind of in the times we're in right now, the best analogy I've heard is just kind of like rush hour traffic. You know, the freeway was only so big and now everybody and their brother is kind of doing what we're doing, right? So a lot of live feeds, a lot of internet usage, a lot of streaming. Yeah, you guys get it. So it's busy out there. So if you do get cut off, just join back on. We'll be here. Do your best to try to find the best nice Wi-Fi signal from your house. Steal your neighbors, whatever you're doing, and we're gonna go. So again, if you miss anything, it'll be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. And again, I'm Chris Martin. I'm with Elkhart Brass and our Safe Fleet Fire EMS and Industrial Group. I'm part of the Brass Tacks team, and we also have Jerry Herbst with us. Jerry, want to say a few words?
I do. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Welcome, everybody. I'm chuckling here. There's been 10 comments, and 3 of them so far are about Ray's beard. We're happy to have Ray on tonight, and you see we've got a couple others events posted. Every instructor from season 1 and season 2 is on board. This is not going to go away. We've got a great thing going here. We were kind of forced to do it, but the byproduct of that is finding a new way to go a little bit deeper on some of these subjects. The nice thing about the Brass Tacks Hard Facts series is that they pique interest in a subject that you should pursue on your own. Now you've got an opportunity to go deep and question the instructor directly. Happy to have Ray with us. Ray and I go back a lot of years. Something about Ray I've always admired is it's like the subject matter tonight. It's not so much that the subject matter is revolutionary or foundational to the fire service, but what Ray has done with it is, and that's the revolutionary aspect of having Ray involved, is his personal commitment, his high sense of ownership from the job breeds an in-depth study to every aspect of the attack system. And in this case, we're talking about water mapping. And I'd like to think, and one of the things I admire about that sense of ownership is it started as a way to better himself as a firefighter and his company as a firefighter and his department, and then, the fire service as a whole. So he's an OG dude that I have a lot of respect for, and he's going to leave things better than they were when he arrived. So with that, Ray, welcome. A little background on yourself. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate the kind words. Hi, Chris, as well, and everybody that's tuning in. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. This is a subject that has gained a lot of attention over the last couple of years for the most part, for most people, due to the UL study, the fire attack study, which had a sub-branch on water mapping, which is in the full report. And some very interesting stuff came out of that. Jerry, as you know, we were talking before the show, water mapping. I've been doing that in my class for probably the last eight years, maybe even more. I dug up a picture not long ago from 2013 out in California. We had set up a hallway to do it. And so it's been around a while in my teachings. And one of the nice things is that we have UL now giving that idea a good stamp of approval for future firefighters to learn about, which is awesome. Basically, science meets the street, but the street is telling the science, look, this is what we've been doing. It works pretty well. What do you think about it? And they just help validate stuff we've been doing, which is also great. Like I said, it was a pleasure to do the Brass Tacks Hard Facts videos. I got to pick pretty much whatever I wanted to do, and I did them, and I enjoyed making them. Brian, who filmed all the videos and did the animation, is just phenomenal. Really couldn't have asked for a better professional video to come out, and it really does your company and the information justice, because a lot of people really got a lot out of that, and will get a lot out of it. And like I said, covered topics that were interesting to me, and they're right there for anybody to see. And if they ever have any questions on them, of course they can ask. So the water mapping, like I said, that's a subset of some of the teaching I do, but it's garnered a lot of attention of late, and there's a lot of people doing it, which is good as well. And we're basically here to talk about it.
Cool. So thanks, Ray. Thanks, Jerry. We're going to pop up a little part of the episode that Ray filmed for some of you that, I don't know, might be living under a rock and never heard of water mapping. At least that defines what it is, essentially how the water is going to move throughout the compartment. Before I do that, though, I just wanted to show everybody something real quick and confirm a lot of suspicions that we have when we watch our local news. And that is that typically your newscaster doesn't wear pants. So this was when we filmed the standpipe bag episode, and you can see it was a nice hot day, and we took our take and we got out of there. So, Ray,
I think that bag was bottomless too.
We actually had a hole cut in the table, so we just kept putting stuff in there. Let's put the Humad valve in the standpipe bag, right? People have no idea. No big deal, man. That Elkhart standpipe bag holds all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, Ray, always the educator. The other one we like to show here to the crew is the two. I like to call this is the two Rays. Ray McCormack and Rachel Ray, right? So they did a fundraiser out at the Rock, and there's Ray showing her the proper usage of a fog nozzle, right?
Yeah. That was a fun day. That was like you said, it was a benefit for the Dennis Leary Foundation, and basically the people that I worked with at the Fire Academy, the Tactical Training Unit, which deals with basically all the in-service training at the Fire Academy, the hands-on, and a lot of the education that goes on there. They put this together, and I had the station where we did the nozzle work and the nozzle advancement. And of course we had a few celebrities on scene, and Rachel was one of them, and taking them through a little mock hallway course was a lot of fun, and they got a lot out of it. And the fire service benefits from these things. We raised a lot of money for the FDNY Foundation that day, and everybody had a good time.
That's awesome. All right, we're gonna pop up just this little clip here to kind of get the ball rolling. If you've got any questions, pop them up there. We'll do our best to try to answer them if they're relevant what we're talking about. And forgive me here, I'm just kind of sliding some pictures around. So.
And we're going to get down to the brass tacks and hard facts of water mapping with a smoothbore nozzle. The nozzle firefighter is currently outside the fire room. Our initial stream entry into the room will be high. We want to capture most of the ceiling with our stream. This is the hottest space within the room. It's the most unobstructed space within the room. What's going to happen is the stream is going to hit the surface of the ceiling and ride the ceiling until it hits an obstruction, which is the wall opposite the stream. Once it hits that wall, the majority of the water will cascade down that wall. What happens is we're killing the fire gases, the high heat level in the room. One of the features of having the stream angle up high just below the header of the door allows us to get most of the ceiling wet. One of the drawbacks of what happens there is that the stream does not go down at the same angle it goes up. And I'll show you this by standing directly underneath it and barely getting wet. Once the nozzle firefighter hits the ceiling and cools the fire gases, it's time to move inside the room.
Quick summary.
Everybody back on there. So there's a little clip to get us going. I'm getting on still here. Go ahead, Ray.
Right, let me just talk about the animation portion of that, which I really like. There is, like we said, the high angle entry of the stream is what we want. We want to hit that ceiling as close to the entry wall as possible, because this gives our water the longest distance to ride. It provides the most cooling power it can. Obviously, if the stream was lower and the flatter it was basically to the ceiling, we'd be hitting close to the opposite wall. That really wouldn't give us much cooling effect. So you want to get it in under that header if you can, and hit it as close to the entry wall as possible. One of the things that the stream does do as well, it rides across the width of the ceiling as well and cascades down the walls a bit as well. So while the majority of the water does go on that back wall, there is distribution onto the side walls as well. So this provides massive surface cooling for us.
Do you want me to pop that other video up, Ray?
Well, I could talk more about the firefighter going into that room.
Sure.
Because that to me is a big deal. When a fire, I mean, we'll talk about the hallway. If you want to show the other video, that's fine. Let's do that. This way I can talk about anything then. Everybody's seen the videos.
Yep. You want the slow-mo, right?
The hallway one?
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
Here we go. Stand by, everybody. Just preloading this. All right, you're back on there, Ray.
All right, so in the video we just saw the plywood hallway there. The firefighter's using a circular motion to hit all the surfaces in the hallway. That's the two side walls, the ceiling, and he's also capturing the floor, which is important as well. A lot of people weren't as attuned to capturing the floor, but it's very important to capture the floor because, you know, it's also a place where the heat develops and transfers and re-radiates back. So we want to capture the floor for that reason, among others. And so basically a lot of firefighters will end up having to cool the hallway space prior to getting down to the fire room. This is a recommended best practice. Could you scoot down to the end of the hallway without putting some water out? Possibly, but if the room's fully involved, which is basically the criteria we're using here, the room is post flashover, it's fully involved. There is a portion of the hallway that is extremely untenable, and that's basically very close to the entrance to the room that's on fire. So you don't want to put yourself in that predicament of not pre-cooling that space. You also are not necessarily aware of the temperatures over your head. They're elevated, obviously, but how close things are to flashing over, that's something you can't take a chance on happening. So what you want to do is you want to cool the space over your head, and while you're doing that, take advantage of the walls and ceiling as well. Again, we have the water to do this. This massive surface cooling prevents any temperature drop from rebounding again. So firefighter entering a hallway would use the stream. They could start at the top of the hallway, mid hallway, wherever they think they need to start. But basically get that water on all those surfaces, because this has been proven to be the best way to prevent rapid fire growth or flashover in that space. You don't know what's close to you that's ready to flash over. In other words, adjacent surfaces that might be much hotter than you know. And remember, you can't see as well. It's very difficult to see. So while that water is not going in the room, unless the door is straight ahead, we're still cooling the space, and that cooling allows us to get down to the fire room quick, and also a lot more safely than if we didn't do it. The last thing you want to do is be cheap on the water, because you come to this space, you have 150 gallons or more per minute with you. There's no point in walking a tightrope down to the fire room where you're going to just put out a little bit of water, a squirt here, a squirt there. That's just crazy. We're past that point. We have to lay down some serious water to make sure that we can get into this space and do it in one move and safely. Basically shooting a little spritz here and a spritz there just invites temperature rebound, and you probably haven't collapsed much of the temperature as well. In fact, one of the little side notes when we did the fire attack study was the fact that the nozzle team was required to do a test of the ceiling every time they went inside for the interior attack. So they would go in about 6 feet or so, open up the nozzle for a second or two, and shut it down again. The prevailing theory from a lot of people was that, well, you could tell what the temperatures were by doing that. If you would monitor the fact that, you know, how did the water come down? Was it hot? Did you feel it come down? The problem was, there was a couple of problems with that. One was that when you hold that stream on any kind of an angle towards the ceiling, it's going to move away from you. So those droplets that you're hoping to analyze basically have shot somewhere else into the house, and you're not going to get them. And that's basically how people did it. The other thing was, even if it did cool, provide any kind of cooling, it rebounded so fast it wasn't funny. So basically, you're in there. This is your life we're talking about. This is people's lives. We are not going to try stuff that might work. We want to try stuff that will work, and we want to overwhelm our enemy in the process. So basically, the firefighters going down the hallway, they can keep the line open and move it, flow and move at the same time, or they can flow, shut down, and advance and open up again. But one of the things that happens is when you stop and you shut down and you advance and then you open up again, it actually takes you longer to get down to the fire room. You may have saved a few gallons of water, but the overall scheme of things, it's not really worth it. What happens for the firefighter who really is well trained is that moving that line, advancing it while it's flowing, is going to do a lot of things. It's going to move the products of combustion out and away from the nozzle team. It's going to cool the surfaces around you, and it's going to allow you to get down to that fire room in the most rapid fashion there is. And it just works. And the circular method is probably the easiest to learn. There are some other methods as well, and they're fine. It's not that they're broadly different in their effect, but the point is the circular method is very easy to teach, because you can make it smaller, you can make it larger, you can include the floor, which is a nice way to do it because it's one less thing you have to do. But that hallway, as we found out, was something I wanted. I'll say that Steve Kerber, who was in charge of the UL program, the UL panel, was very nice, and he obliged me with a 25-foot long hallway. They hadn't looked at long hallways prior to this, and we wanted that feature, and we got it. And that's kind of where this water mapping really got its good start, because as you can see, we have a hallway prop here in the video, and UL has also gone into the business of building a prop or two for themselves and basically modeling it off the fire attack study. So 25-foot hallway. So as you can see that photograph there, that was made by UL, and it conforms to the dimensions that we used in the fire attack study, which is basically, 3-foot wide hallway, 8-foot ceiling, and about 25-foot depth. So,
hey, Ray.
Yeah.
One of the questions here I'm going to pop it up from John Smith, and then Todd Edwards also kind of jumped on the back side of it. But basically, if you lose any of the integrity of the ceiling sheetrock, so a lot of these, the props and everything else, it's kind of the perfect hallway. So if you're losing anything up at the ceiling, is there an alternative way to water map? The question's cut off there, but basically that's what he's asking.
Yeah, I get what he's after. It's basically if you lose a portion of the ceiling, it's not the end of the world, because if it's the part where your stream is striking that you lose, you may know it because it could go into a stud bay and it'll basically come down like a curtain. And that's something else we'll talk about in the commercial end of this whole thing. But
Okay.
If you went into, let's say, a basement area where there was no sheetrock protection, yes, there's a good chance that, it's certainly not going to ride the ceiling because there is no ceiling. So what you'd probably want to do there is a side-to-side nozzle approach. In other words, not a rotation, but more of a left to right nozzle movement, and just try and keep that underneath the height of the ceiling if you can. Now, it's easier said than done. I get that. But that's something you want to think about in the space that you're in. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks.
Wouldn't that, Ray, also apply? I mean, in a cathedral, a big open space in a dwelling, I mean, the stream's going to give you an indication with the lack of return immediately that you've got a higher than the typical ceiling level.
Yeah, well, if you're looking for a return, that basically that little blast of water isn't really going to do much for you. If you think you need to open the line, you should open the line. But as for different configurations, again, it depends on the angle that it hits at. If it's a pretty steep angle, a lot of times it will still ride the ceiling. But if it's a flatter angle, it'll definitely ride the ceiling. So we're still getting water mapping out of these places. You just have to remember that it takes care of some of the surface cooling, but it doesn't really put out the fire necessarily. Right. Now, we had in our study, one of the terms that was coined was a knockback. Now, people have heard the term knockdown, a fire is knocked down. A knockback is to a lesser extent of a knockdown. In other words, it's a level below that. One of the best ways I would describe it is the clown that you punch, you knock it down, but it bounces right back up. And we were seeing that pretty much with almost a good majority of the transitional fire attacks. You would see a change in condition, which was what the UL had described it as. In other words, the fire got darkened down a little bit, but basically you would see the room come back to life. And one of the reasons for that was, with all these things, is when the stream hits the ceiling and it runs the ceiling and it hits the side walls and the wall in front of it, is that it really doesn't impact the center of the room. And in the video I did where, it's a nice parlor trick to stand in the middle of the room there and not really get wet, it kind of brings out the point of the middle of your fire room isn't getting wet as well. So very important that people realize that this is not enough. While we can darken it down, we need to follow that up by getting water into the middle of that room. And, there's several ways to do that. One of the ways that UL did it, and I was there with all the other panel members. This is the fire attack study. And basically, they did a transitional attack on the model. They had a 1,600 square foot house, 4 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, dining room. What happened was they hit the fire from outside. It was the fire in the AB corner. So they're on the alpha side of the house, and they kneel in front of the window, and they give a high angle hit to the room. So they're hitting just under the header, the window header. And they keep the line operating for basically till they see this change in conditions. It could be 7 seconds, 9 seconds, whatever it might be. Shut down, reposition the line for the front door, and then come in and finish it off. But one of the things that they did was they took the nozzle, and it was basically either a smoothbore or a fog. Mostly the smoothbore. I think they did it when I was there that day. they did it at half bail. So we had a nice coarse stream with not as much velocity, obviously, a shorter distance of flow. And they basically did some circular motion just inside the window. They stuck their arm in the window and moved the nozzle around in a circular pattern, not too big, but enough to get it in the center of the room. They were aiming for the center of the room because they knew through the data of the water mapping tests that they had done that they weren't getting water in the middle of the room, and this was something that they wanted to see if they could come up with some solutions on how to do that. So that ground floor window, if accessible, this secondary form of extinguishment, and we debated whether this was an interior attack still or an outside attack. So we kind of came to the consensus that we looked at it as a secondary nozzle movement. And basically, it would only work in certain occasions. Obviously, if you could get close to the building, if you could get your nozzle over the windowsill, whatever the height of that, whatever that might be. And while it did put a little extra oomph into the transitional fire attack, the exterior fire attack, it was really, something that would be probably rare for most people to have that ability to do. And you have to remember, too, that even though you do this is no permission slip not to go inside. You still have to get inside and take care of business, because what we found out between the attack study and the current one that we're finishing up on, the coordinated fire attack, getting inside is what it's all about. Early occupation of the building is what fire departments need to concentrate on.
I'm just popping this up real quick. Thomas Porter was asking where we can go and look at the fire attack study that you did.
Mm-hmm. So you just go to the UL Fire Safety Research Institute website, type in UL in your search engine, and you go to their website. They have all the studies listed. They have training modules listed. There's everything you want to know. It's all in there. It's a really great report on interior fire attack. And my hat's off to them for looking at this. This is a very important component for the American Fire Service. The fact that we are looking at the interior and how does that work? How do we make it behave for us? What are some of the cues that work against us? These are important things that we looked at a little bit, but not in such a concentrated manner. We had over 24 tests of fires in a model house where basically all the rooms were the same. And then in this latest study that I'm involved in, the coordinated fire attack, the model was switched to acquired structures. So there's something to be said for both. Obviously, there are controlled parameters with the setup models that they build, which are great. And there's something to be said for being out in the field as well. We were able to look at some very different things that happen in the field that maybe wouldn't have happened in a controlled environment. Who knows? But it's sort of the best of both worlds.
Now, Ray, hasn't that the initial studies has spurred obviously the need that we need a little bit more research into larger compartments or commercial spaces and that type of a thing. But I found an interesting fact that it helped to validate the water mapping was even on the exterior application you were talking about, the lintel hit or the header hit on a window follows the same methodology from a water travel path. So it seems the research is one portion of the research validates the other, and I think as they move forward with it into a larger compartment space other than dwellings, that'll become a little bit more valuable. There was a question relative to that, going into larger spaces, but obviously this research was based on residential compartment fires.
Yeah, the fire attack study is based on a house, a residential house. The coordinated fire attack study covers 3 models. It covers the private house, the commercial store, the strip mall, the one-story strip mall, and multifamily. Now, getting back to the lintel hit. So the lintel hit was also in the water mapping study, and it really didn't gain much traction until we looked at it again, and basically people were doing transitional fire attack and they were having regrowth. The knockback syndrome was in full effect, and that's just the way it is. And what happened was they needed something to create more hold time for this fire. And through the research, when the stream hits the top of the window, the lintel we were calling it, the top of the window frame or the top of the door frame, now it's hitting a surface that's at least 1, maybe 2, several feet below the ceiling level. And what happens is that distribution becomes flatter, and basically it fills up more of the pans in the center of the room, so to speak. So if you were hitting something from the outside and there's a smoke condition, it's very likely when you pull that stream back to get your best angle, or you're just looking to take it out of that space and shut it down, that you're going to hit the lintel at some point. And what we found was this was a good way to increase the hold time of the knockback in the room that was hit from the exterior. And it's easier. Nobody has an arm on the second floor. They can't run up the side of the building and put the half bale in the window. That's not going to work. So the lintel hit became something that was easy to do. It didn't require any adjustments to the nozzle. It basically just meant take that stream and bring it right to the edge of the window, hit it, and you'll see in the study, the graphs show it exactly the way it worked. And it's a good secondary move for somebody, because one of the problems with the transitional fire attack always seemed to be that it was sort of a race to compete with the interior fire attack, in that the interior fire attack, basically, once the door is open, you proceed towards wherever the fire is. So if you're doing a transitional fire attack, you're going to have to move your line to that window, hit the room, hopefully add a little lintel hit to that, come back with the line, redeploy it back to the front door. So while you may get water into the room around the same time, it's going to take a lot longer for that line to get back to where the fire room is on the interior, and we don't have firefighters on the inside. So it is a consideration. And the coordinated fire attack study is going to be very interesting, because looking at private dwellings and seeing what the effects of fires on the second floor, and whether a transitional attack is even worth the effort. I mean, there's a lot of data and a lot of information. When we were out in Ohio, which was where we did the private dwelling fires for that study, one of the interesting things that happened there was that we had a fire on the second floor on the Bravo side, second floor bedroom, and the nozzle team, had to go down the Bravo side of the house. Now, this house was built on a bit of a hill. So basically, to get the line there to do a transitional fire attack, they had to go up over to the next property line along that house and down, because it wasn't as steep there, and then in towards the house that was on fire, the test house. And they deployed their stream and hit it and shut down. What we did in that case was we used 2 hand lines. Even though it's a 1-line experiment, we used 2 hand lines so they didn't have to move it. But what we did do was we added a minute to the clock, which seemed reasonable. The panel members are always on scene at these experiments to add any technical knowledge that may be asked for, or that we see something needs to be added to it. In other words, so basically, they knew that there was a time lag. If they were to redeploy this line to the front door, how long would that take? So in this case, it probably would have been longer than a minute in real life. But in other cases, it would be less. So the consensus was we would say it would be a minute. So we added another minute to that. And then you see when that line goes in and right up the interior stairs, because they're really not dealing with a smoke condition on the first floor, they can move that line right up to that second floor and put a hit on that bedroom pretty easily. So, this was important information for engine officers, chief officers, training officers. All this stuff plays into what is your decision making on a fire ground going to be.
Yeah, I love, you and I have gone deep on that several times, and the time factor is that. I mean, are you doing an A to delay getting to the B when, you know, that the primary attack from the inside is going to accomplish the exact same objective in less time.
Yeah, well, so this is the beauty of these studies, is that we now have some information for the firefighters that are going in. Now, some firefighters will have a choice of whether they're going to hit a fire from outside or they're going to just strictly do it from inside. And there has always been factors that push us to an exterior attack first. So, you know, people would say, well, you know, you don't like to hit a fire from the outside first. There's always been the parameters. Basically, let's say you've got a forcible entry situation, you can't get in. That's a delay. Wind-driven fire, that's another tactical delay. Hoarding conditions, people trapped, or fire coming around into the position because of wind or whatever it might be, coming around and basically endangering the nozzle team. Well, you're going to have to open the line, obviously, or
Right.
you have an exterior fire growth that's going to take a good portion of this building if we don't put water on it right away. So there's always been that, but we need the knowledge for the firefighter who is going inside. Usually, more than likely, it's third floor and above. You basically can ask an engine company to hit a fire from the exterior and then drag that wet line up to the third floor, 3 flights of stairs. That's really not going to work very well. So while a fire may be able to be hit from the outside at a greater height than that, with a hand line, your options are basically limited to the first and maybe the second floor. That's probably about it, using the same hose line, of course.
There's a quick question here. It's a bit of a pivot, but it works well here with what we're talking about, and specifically your episode that you did called "The Bounce," right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's cut off on the screen here for everybody to see, but basically, Josh is asking, can you discuss water mapping and varying sounds to basically understand your environment and create a mental picture of the room? So kind of that, how the sound of the stream becomes a sixth sense, you know, when you're pushing a hallway or whatever you might be doing to locate a hole in the floor or whatever, window opening, whatever. You can talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The sound of your stream, especially a smoothbore stream, is very pronounced when it's hitting things, obviously other surfaces, hard surfaces. So in rooms, basically, you're going to move it around the ceiling, you're going to move it around the walls to the floor. If an absence of sound is something you really have to be concerned about, and water right back at you is another good indicator. The first one being a void space, the second one being something directly in front of you that you don't see yet. So that happens, especially in heavy smoke condition. So we have always used the water as a tactical reference as to, is there a floor here? And we would sweep the floor specifically for that. And that's prevalent in buildings that are abandoned and things like that. You could have it in an occupied building, though. There's no doubt that you could have missing floor. And basically, it's the absence of noise that we're looking for more than the sound. Obviously, if my stream is hitting a wall directly in front of me, I'm gonna kind of know that it's gonna kind of bounce back at me. And while that's important, I think the absence of something is even more important. So when you have a room knocked down, basically, and you're not quite sure where the window is, I would run the stream across the window, across the 3 walls, basically, that I'm at, and just see where's that void space. And best way to tell a window from a door is just to lower that stream and to see if it goes all the way down to the floor and you're not hearing anything. That should kind of tell you how big that opening is. And then of course you want to do a hydraulic ventilation if you can, once you've got the fire knocked down.
You want to talk, since you brought up the words there, you want to talk a little bit about, we get a lot of like, well, how do you hydraulically ventilate with the smoothbore? We showed in one of the episodes using a little cheap plastic fog nozzle, taking the tip off, half bailing. What's your experience with that? Because you hear that a lot of times. Well, we can't have a smoothbore because we need it to hydraulically ventilate. Well,
the smoothbore, its secondary function, of course, is to hydraulically ventilate. It's not its first function. It's put out the fire. So hydraulic ventilation can be done with a smoothbore nozzle, obviously. Basically, spin off the tip that's on there currently and open up that bail till you hear a very loud noise, and you'll see a very coarse stream come out of that. And basically, I can't tell you it's half. It's, it's somewhere between a quarter and half. You have to look. Sometimes the bail, the way it's positioned, it's at half, but it's not actually half, not cutting off half the water. So while that's a good reference, it's basically in that neighborhood. So basically, you want that chunky, coarse, loud stream. Basically, put it into the window. Basically, in other words, fit it into the window. Pull that line back as far as you can from the window while getting most of that water to exit the room, and manipulate the stream as however you want, up and down, side to side. Basically, what that's going to do is it's going to entrain a lot of the air in that space and exit the smoke out. It's going to draw fresh air in and exit out the smoke. Now, at that point, if you don't have the fire room door, the house front door, whatever way the line came in, you don't have it open by now. You should have already, but now you definitely want that door open, because that's going to help evacuate the smoke out of the occupancy. And it's something we can do right away. It's very simple, and you still have a functioning hand line there, so your safety is still assured. It's not a safety issue at all.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really talk too much about the fire room. Let me just talk a little bit about that. Talked about the firefighter going down the hallway, but once a firefighter is out of room, again, this high stream angle comes into effect. It works out very well because water rides the ceiling, and like I say in my class, it looks like a pizza when it hits the ceiling. Regular, not Sicilian. Not Chicago either. Anyway, so basically, it looks like that shape. It's a V shape, rides the ceiling. You can move it from side to side a little bit. That's not a problem. We don't have to have a strict rigidity to the stream. We're right at the edge of the doorway. We can do that. It's not a problem, especially with the smoothbore nozzle. So basically, we're getting it in under the header, close into the entry wall, and our water is hitting the ceiling, it's hitting the sidewalls, it's hitting the wall in front of us, getting good coverage. Next thing I would do, I would bring the line down and try and get the middle of that room wet, whether you use circles or whatever, across, side to side, whatever it is you like to do. Get that water down a little lower. You had it at like 8 feet for the ceiling. Bring it down to about 4 feet and start moving it around. Once you're done with that, I would sweep the floor, because there are things on the floor that are burning. We don't really know the condition of the floor, so we want to cool that space. We might be kneeling on it. There's a lot of things that can go on. There could be somebody laying there. The stream will bounce into them. You'll get an instant bounce back. These things happen. So anyway, sweep the floor. That's for you. That's for the firefighter. That gives you a heads up on what's the condition of the floor. It also gives us a little bit of a safety factor when we go into this room. This room was fully involved. It was 1,000 degrees. So we want to make sure that we cool it off for ourselves. There are things on the floor. Most firefighters better remember, you go into a bedroom, where do you think those mattress coils are? They're on the floor, and they're still hot. Base fire extinguishment is very important. A lot of firefighters don't pay enough attention to that. We want to cool the space on the floor and just above the floor. And because nothing is perfect and we're in a smoky condition, that stream a little off the ground is going to do wonders for things that are still burning, like the base of a couch or the mattress coils or the mattress itself. So very important to sweep the floor, get us in that room. Once we're in that room, then we can move our stream around anywhere we need to do it. One of the important things with hitting a room is you have to get your shoulders past the doorway, because otherwise you're in the space restriction of the door buck itself. So once you go past that 32 or 36 inches, now you can move your line wherever you want. Imagine your line is outside the apartment door, 36-inch wide door. That's it. That's all the movement you're going to get out of that line is 36 inches. And basically that's what's going to happen inside. You're missing all that distance to the width of that room. Once you get past that room with your shoulders, now you can manipulate that stream wherever you need to go. One of the things that I like to talk about, and I've talked about it for years, is that the wall you enter on stays kind of dry. Now, even though you may hit it at a high angle, you may not hit it at the highest angle you thought you did. So once you get into the room and you've shut down, you've gotten the fire knocked down, turn around. There might still be some stuff burning behind you, not to be surprised by. This is very common because that wall stays fairly dry when you enter. And I wouldn't necessarily talk about throwing a line over my shoulder at that point. I just turn around and take care of it. It's not a big deal. Remember, the swing of the door covers a space as well. When that door swings inside, there's a space back there that hasn't been hit by the water, and basically just move the door and take care of whatever else is there. And then in the interim, things will start to light up. Whatever you didn't get, you just go over there. You can kind of half bell most of that and take care of it. And then the next thing is to hydraulically ventilate the room. But have a method. It's pretty simple stuff, but don't get caught up in all this fancy stuff. Just keep it kind of basic, and you'll do just fine.
I think that's sage advice right there. The whole mapping thing on the approach is controlling our environment to and get to the fire room. But I think you coined it right there, Ray, and that comes through loud and clear. Is calm down, approach it with a methodology. It's a bedroom fire, is what we're talking about, and how to approach it and get to that point is what is the mapping is going to control the environment for you to access it. The other key, I think I draw from this, and you see a lot of dialogue on this and interaction in the instructional setting, is the over obsession with high. We have to control the heat there on the approach, but the majority of the burning material is 4 feet below the middle of the room. If you're sitting in a room right now, take a glance to your right and your left, where's the majority of the combustible material? So that midpoint and down to the floor is where we're actually operating. So it's just a further extension of controlling your own environment.
Yeah. I just sent you a text, Chris. One of the things I wanted to say, which is a big caution, and I try and cover it in my fire tack classes all the time, was what you do outside, you may not want to do inside. The exterior fire attack, transitional fire attack, basically you do that high angle stream entry. And again, we described how the water reacts to that. And one of the things that we want to be careful of is it's when that room goes back on fire, when it rebounds, you're pretty much outside when that occurs. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the fact that if you have 2 rooms on fire in a house, so we basically have the A-B corner on fire, the corner room of the house, and we also have a room on the Charlie side of the house. In other words, down this long hallway, midway down towards the back, is the middle room is on fire, and the end of the hallway is on fire as well. So they're separated by that flow path. Basically, the A-B corner had fire, and the Charlie bedroom had its window open, and basically the fire went down the hallway, got into the other bedroom, got a low pressure area in there with the open window, and now we have 2 rooms on fire connected by the hallway. So it looks like an S, basically, if you were to look at it. So the fire team comes in, they see this condition, they open their line in the hallway, they control the hallway, they knock it down. They come to the Charlie bedroom first because it's the first one they encounter. They use a high angle stream entry on the room, which is great. They get a change in conditions. Wonderful. Do they now continue down to the A-B bedroom? I would say no, do not do that. Now, you have to keep an eye on what's going down there because that flow path still exists. However, once you darken that room down with the high stream angle, you must continue to attack that Charlie bedroom. In other words, you must get your shoulders past that doorway to manipulate your stream and get better coverage of that room because the middle has been missed. And we know when the middle is missed, the fire will come back. The last thing we want to do is be down the hallway with fire coming out of a bedroom that we previously passed. The big caution here is a fire behind you has a better chance of.
Who's that?
I don't know.
Got a hot one?
I don't know. I hope I can get you back on. You can't see me, can you? No, right?
I can see you.
You see me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I lost you guys. All right.
No, you have live television.
All right. So anyway, what happened was now you're fighting this fire in the middle bedroom, which is great. But if you turn your back on it and go down the hallway, that room's going to come back to life. And the problem with the fire behind you is just that it can endanger your water supply. A fire in front of you rarely does that because we have the ability to cool it ahead of our advance. So basically what I tell people is when you have that situation where you have two rooms separated and you have fire in both of them, you need to really take care of that first room. You really need to knock that down real well with a stream. Keep your eye on the other room. Once you're satisfied that you've put enough water in this room, try and close the door, whatever's left of it, even the bottom half is fine because the air will track from the outside at the lowest level. So close whatever's left and then continue down to the other bedroom and put that out. Now, this is also a good opportunity if you needed a second line to bring that second line in and take care of that rear Charlie bedroom. Babysit that a little bit if need be, or have at least somebody come down the hallway and monitor that room for you because that's important. So basically the transitional attack on the outside, you can't do that on the inside. You need to follow that up with aggressive interior attack of that room and basically get your shoulders past that doorway. You don't have to fully commit to the room. Nobody's saying to do that because you don't want to have to fight your way back out of the room. Just get your shoulders past the doorway and, give that room a good bath.
Awesome.
Hey, Ray, you can play this video we got queued up here. This is the one from Texas.
Sure.
I'm going to mute you guys.
Yeah, what I really love about that video that was filmed down in Texas is that it shows it in real time, and then it shows it in slow motion, and it just shows the great coverage we're getting with that circular motion in the hallway. And I don't think you could ask for a better video than that. It's really cool. And you can see how fast he's moving that nozzle initially. And the faster you move it, the faster the products of combustion move away from your team. So we used to, when we do a drill, we would always tell the firefighters, move that nozzle, move it fast, move it faster. And turns out we were right.
A lot of questions tonight. I think you must have saw Dennis last week because we talked about Dennis's beard. And just in a matter of a week, Ray grew his out. But the Kenny Rogers, that's got me laughing pretty hard. Sorry.
Your beard envy.
Yeah, the beard. All it comes back to the beard. I'm trying, but I got nothing.
Hey guys, bottom line is everybody's getting hairier and heavier.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, part of this, the water mapping went hand in hand with their other experiments, which was the air entrainment. And, the smoothbore moving down the hallway in trains about 5,000 cubic feet of air per minute. And it's not an issue with the vent in front of you or without the vent in front of you. So I'm very happy that we were able to get this long hallway. It changed a lot of people's minds on flowing and moving. We had a lot of firefighters in this country who didn't do interior attacks that way. And some fought the idea tooth and nail that this was not a good way to operate. And it turns out it's a very good way to operate because we're not allowing that rebound of temperatures. And that's important for the firefighters. Remember, their safety is based on this water flow. So again, it's not a lot of water that's being flowed in the hallway, and it serves a purpose. It allows you to get down to the fire room safely. That's a great investment for a few gallons of water.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we had on our list here, Ray, I don't know that we went too deep on it, but basically commercial occupancies.
Oh, right.
Right. So any ceiling issues in commercial buildings?
Well, I've always felt that commercials should be handled a little differently with the nozzle firefighter than residential. And this again has just now come out with. You haven't seen it yet, but I have the drafts of the commercial portion of the coordinated fire attack, and also being there during the experiments and talking about the effects and what we're seeing. You don't know the exact effect of the data, obviously, when they're collecting it, but sometimes they have a good sense of what they see and whether it's reached their expectation or it took them down a different road they didn't expect. So while they don't know all of that on that day, sometimes there's some interesting things we see, and we see it as panel members as well. So one of the things that I always felt about and I've done a previous video on it with fire engineering, was the side-to-side fire attack. And I've always talked about that for bigger spaces, not your typical house fire, but something like 30 foot wide, your typical store, 25 by 75, whatever it might be. And basically, instead of making a circular pattern, just do a side-to-side, because that allows the coverage to cover pretty much anything you want. When we used to do overhaul, and we still do it, when you're doing beam overhaul, you get yourself in the corner of the room or the middle, whatever it is you want to be, and you work one side of the beam from end to end. Then you get on the other side of the room and you do the back sides of the beams. That's a thorough wash down. Basically, your commercial building kind of falls into that category a lot of times because of the fact that the ceiling is a collapsible ceiling. We have ceiling tiles as opposed to a sheetrock ceiling. So when you have a solid sheetrock ceiling or a concrete ceiling in fireproof buildings, now your stream will be able to ride that ceiling and go pretty far. But when you have a drop ceiling, it changes a lot. It changes a lot on the water distribution, and it changes a lot on the coverage. So, a lot of times we got pushed out of fires because we were probably doing circular motions into beams, which basically brings the curtain down on the stream. Think about it. If you shoot a stream into that space, that horizontal drop space, basically the space between one beam and another, that thing is just going to hit that thing and drop right where it is. So we probably lost a lot of our water power, if you will, on commercial buildings because of drop ceilings, ductwork, things like that. Any obstruction to the stream will drop it straight down. And, in the heat of battle, you may not know that. But one of the things with a side-to-side stream is that while I can't say it'll stay out of the ceiling area totally, and we don't always want it to stay out of the ceiling area because that's an area we do want to cool off. And I have no problem with knocking down the suspended ceiling and getting into that space where the actual structural beams are, because we want to get water on them as well. The side-by-side gives us a more methodical approach to extinguishment versus the circular. I always tell people, if you watch a circular stream, it hits the same every time. It'll fall off at one spot, it'll be harder in another. Whereas the side-to-side stream always hits at the same impact, basically, as it goes through. In other words, you don't miss much. That solid stream is hitting that spot, and it's continuing solid to the next, all the way down the line, pretty much. So one of the things we have to be mindful of is in commercial buildings with drop ceilings, our high stream angle can work well for a while, but we also have to think about sort of lowering it, flattening it a little bit to get it deeper. That's the problem with the drop ceiling. It doesn't necessarily allow us to get it ride that basically, because the stream is going to knock into it and just knock it down. So we found that's a very interesting thing as well. The fact that you might want to think about using a different motion of your stream. The other thing is, when you go into a commercial building, depending on what it is, let's say it's a store of some sort and has shelving, you got to be careful, because you're knocking a lot of things down and we're creating a cluttered condition for ourselves. I'm not saying you don't have to hit these things, you do, but we have to be mindful of the fact that our stream can cause problems for us, either advancing or when we want to leave and we're trying to follow the line out. That's probably the harder example. But the other thing we looked at, of course, is, besides mapping, is what about the sustainability of the stream? In other words, what are the parameters of stream survival? In other words, we know that hallways are perfect for fire streams, because they're long and narrow, just like a fire stream. But when we get into a wider space, what about the thermal decline of a stream? In other words, if we have heavy fire in a space that's 50 feet wide and 50 feet deep, that puts a lot of stress on that stream. I think if one leg is within, 25 by 75, I don't think we have a problem there too much. But when both legs get a little big, we probably have to go with a bigger stream, because remember, no matter how good we are, if the heat is eating up a portion of it, we're losing effectiveness. So we want to throw heavy water at something that's larger, because of the fact that it's going to degrade a little bit as it travels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a reason for the big line.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And not to get off on it a little bit, but we, in this coordinated fire attack study, we also looked at the effect of ventilation on especially commercial buildings. I think in my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do, I believe the dimension is important. I also believe the ability to have topside ventilation, whether man-made or failure-made, is something that has to be looked at when you're discussing line choice. Obviously, we talk about an uncompartmented space and things like that. So you have the uncompartmented space, you have tall ceilings, you have either the ability to ventilate it or to see ventilation failure via skylight or fire burn through. That's going to change the dynamic of that fire in that space. Whereas when we have the same size occupancy within a dwelling where there is no potential for a man-made opening or basically a skylight failure, the amount of fire will be less.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just, before we move on, Ray, I've been a couple of comments, a shout out to a good friend and brother in Chicago, Jimmy Davis. If you haven't caught everything, it will be available on our media outlets and also in its entirety. So if you want to use it in a trading setting, tonight's and every broadcast is available on our media outlets. Ray, do you think it would be relevant? We've talked about the approach and the water mapping, and I think it might be a good time. Let's throw up that hallway approach video that you did. It's the same concept. There's so many things have been validated, interior, exterior hits about the travel of water, and the fact we're not talking about extinguishment. We're talking about controlling the environment to the approach to extinguishment,
Right.
And I think that the video there lends a little bit more credibility to it as well. So Stretch, let's throw that up as well.
Yeah, let's just take a second here, guys. Let me cue it up.
He's going to raise it back, and as it comes back, you're going to see how it cools the ceiling, gets the upper walls. These are the hottest portions of the hallway. By doing this technique, we're assured that we've cooled off the hallway and we can advance down to the fire area. As you can see, the stream divides itself evenly within the space, getting the upper walls wet and the sealing wedge, we've assured ourselves that we've hit the hottest part of our travel path. As the stream approaches more of a 90-degree angle, we're getting more of the wall wet, and the firefighter will be able to feel those droplets come back towards them. Once the stream is close to 90 degrees, the stream will actually go behind you. In case there was anything else that needed to be cooled, you're going to get that as well. As you can see, this technique is very quick. The amount of water used is minimal. We're going to cool this hallway off so we can get to the fire area. That's part of being aggressive. That's part of being smart.
One of the things in that video was we did it reversed. We hit basically where the fire area was and brought it back. Basically, we were getting the hit on that hottest part of the fire area. We talked about like a red zone, if you will, right outside the fire room.
Sorry, guys.
Okay. If you didn't know how long the hallway was, this was a good way to find out. Basically, start your stream out a little below the ceiling level and bring it back. And granted, I do talk about the fact that as it flattens out, it moves backwards. But you're basically not going to be able to do that too much, really, from outside the room. So, again, I believe in getting in a little deep, take care of everything that's in front of you, and then dedicate yourself to turning around and make sure everything's good. But in this case here, we did the stream from the far end back, and you can actually see what it's actually doing. And like I said, it's dividing itself, and it's getting massive surface cooling. And I'm not going to tell you this is all you need to do. It might be. We're certainly cooling down the space. You do whatever you think you need to do, but flow some good water. Don't cheat yourself. That would be the only thing I would say. And the fact that this shows that when you cool your approach, you'll get down to the fire room faster. So
there's the key. Time is the key there. I totally agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The approach methodology. You've got a couple of different gears you're working with here, and the first one is to just take a second and prepare for entry. Right. If the path to the fire isn't controlled, that's what's going to bite us in the ass. So that's one speed. And the push is another speed entirely, based on the conditions. And then you've got a different methodology at the threshold to the room.
Yeah, I mean, I things have changed in the fire service. You need to condition the space you're going to be in next. You just need to do that. If you had a room of fire and you had another one in front of that on fire, you would condition the space you're in and try and get a little bit of a hit on the next one, putting your stream in that next doorway if you can find it. There again, we talk about the noise of the stream, especially people that go to fires maybe in rooms that back up on each other, that have their entrances centered on each other. Lower that stream down a little bit, start to get a knock on the next room. So this is the same theory. Basically, we're making sure that our firefighters who've gone inside are able to perform effectively and as quickly as possible, because not every house comes with a window that we can attack it from. So,
sure. I think another valuable lesson here, and a lot of it has to do with, I guess, where you fight fires. But this stuff, this is firefighter one knowledge. You're not always going to have a boss telling you what to do here. This is a typical approach to a couple guys making a push on a room contents fire, or a small fire or a large fire. But it's this firefighter level knowledge. This isn't something you need a third person to be able to validate for. You have to have an ownership for it, because you're the one pushing the hall.
That's cool. And as you know, conditions for the nozzle firefighter can be dramatically different than those behind them. So it was always good to know the speed and the style of the nozzle firefighter that was in front of me, and realizing that they are in a situation that I'm not in yet, and I'm not going to be in. It's going to change. They're going to change it for me. And the fact that, realizing that, hey, if they've got this line open, they needed it open. And, even if you do have an officer there, somebody has to be cognizant of the fact that we can open the line on smoke, and when we're in a condition where we can't see and we have extremely high heat, we need to open the nozzle.
Lord.
We need to open the nozzle, hopefully in the direction of the fire. More than likely, the fire is some sort of shielded fire. The bedroom firefighter is shielded because we don't have direct water access into it. Unless now there's another thing that came out of this hallway was that if you stay on the opposite side of the hallway from the fire room, you'll have early water entry. And this was something that I had done another video on years ago. Basically, we get early water into that room if you're on the opposite side. And basically, you could slide that stream down that wall where the fire is. Let's say it's in the front, the AB corner, and you're in that hallway, that center hallway. You're going down the hallway, you're on the Charlie side of that hallway. Put that stream on the A side of the wall and run it down. It's going to find that void space between of the doorway, and it's going to hit that door buck, and part of that stream is going to flatten out and basically go almost like I wouldn't say maybe full height of the door, but that stream is going to flatten out, and it's going to be going into that room, and you're going to get a good vertical coverage of that room in a certain space. So you're going to get some value out of that. There's definitely added value into early water into the room. Definitely value to that.
Yeah, I think one of the, there's a propensity to put the rookie firefighter on the nozzle in a lot of places. And in the absence of a boss, the position between the two firefighter and the nozzle man in that scenario is something to take into consideration as in your training paradigm, because you're putting a lot of decision-making capability on the least experienced member at the point of attack. And we all know, the nozzle firefighter he's going to get the brunt of what you're going into. There's no doubt about it. So, the distance between the nozzle firefighter and the two firefighter when you've got a rookie there is critical when it comes to decisions like this. It's just something to take into consideration, I think, in the training paradigm, if your SOP or SOG is to put the rookie on the knob.
Yeah, I mean, I came up in a system where the officer is supervising and has basically control of what's going on there. The nozzle firefighter basically is doing the work once told to open the line. Of course, there are, if there's an emergency, they can certainly open a nozzle. But that is a good system. And the system is also good in the sense that we believed in flow and move, which for a young firefighter is probably the best because it simplifies what you're doing. You're doing a simple O pattern. You're advancing as best you can forward. And the other thing that happens is you're eased of the burden of when to turn on the nozzle and when to shut it off. That's been taken away from you. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And the other thing is it ups the safety level because you are constantly flowing water. So if something shows up on the left or the right that needs to be hit, you're ready to do it. So there are other benefits to flow and move that people may not understand. But like I said, I came up in a system that uses this. And now through the validation of the research, this technique is going to be used by more and more people.
Agreed.
Jake popped on there right before we started talking, basically asking the same thing about water mapping with a hit move versus a full push, and I think you wrapped it. But and Jake, nice job on the children's book reading. Showed that one to my kids.
I would say something on hit and move. Let me just cover that a little bit. The hit and move was also used in our study, and it worked pretty well. It was they did their first hit at the top of the hallway. Shut down, did some rotations, they didn't do rotations, I'm sorry. They did the upside down U, or as I like to call it, an N. Basically, they did that, and they would shut down and move up to the halfway point. Yep, the upside down U, there it is, also known as the lowercase n. They would do that, and basically what happened, the only downside to that was it took longer to get to the room. Now I know plenty of firefighters do it, and I just think it varies on your skill level. And yeah, there it is. And I mean, you do as you want on a fire ground. Nobody is there to say you have to do this, you have to do that. But the point is, can you use hit and move? Sure, you could. It's a little less water, but I wouldn't be worried about the water so much. I like the idea of the fact that the nozzle team has a rhythm and they move down the hallway in a steady fashion, and flowing and moving at the same time creates that. And it might be a few gallons more, but it's faster. And I don't make that up. It's right in the study.
I would agree. We've had those conversations countless times, and barring any unforeseen, wind conditions, it's rare you're going to lose in a hallway if you're flowing water.
No, you own it. You control that space. When we get into the open spaces of, multi-room, the modern fire apartment, if you will, or modern home, the gathering rooms are all clustered together, and the kitchen is probably one of the worst places to have a fire, because the kitchen typically has two entrances, and we've had fire wrap around people because of that, and they're heading towards the far entrance, and they haven't seen the close entrance, and they have the door open, and now you have the low pressure area outside that space, whether it's the hallway or the entrance to a home, whatever it might be. And next thing you know, we have fire behind the nozzle team, and now it's just a matter of what are you going to do next. So those gathering rooms are dangerous, because really your only step back is outside.
Yep.
In other words, if something really goes wrong, you got to get yourself out of that apartment, or you get yourself out of that house. The hallway kind of contains all that. And even if you just did a hit for a while, decent flow, that's going to hold you down. It's going to hold the temperatures down a little bit for a little while. Obviously, we don't want to just pencil that. That's not going to work.
No. I'm sitting in the environment you're talking about. The open area and the kitchen is basically a roller rink, because it's a circular thing with a whole bunch of stuff in the middle, and that's so much more common now. You see this actually in a lot of areas that have been gentrified, where you've got row homes that have been bought. 2 of them have been bought, and center walls have been taken out, and open spaces and cathedral openings. So that that the GPM mentality hit on that. That demographic is changing as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you go back to some of those comments we were talking about, sounding the stream, and that becomes critical. Because if you go in and you're expecting a 10-foot ceiling and it's not, it's time to start questioning your environment.
Oh, 100%. One of the biggest things is you go from residential to commercial, and you've got a 16-foot ceiling, and now you got more than twice the firepower that would normally be up there over your head. And if you're getting pushed down, you better have that nozzle open.
Oh yeah. There's a whole lot of environment above you just working against it.
Right, and you don't know it because you can't see it. Yep. And you might feel it a bit, or maybe you don't feel it right away, but then when you do, it might be too late. So, we're going to open up our line in that condition. The other thing, we talked about the kitchen and the circular motion of the fire, and I agree 100%. One of the things that engine companies have to practice, unfortunately, is what happens when there is fire behind you. And, the turning radius of a 2.5 in an apartment is not very good. So you have to be able to bend that line back on itself and decide what you're going to do. If you're going back, that's the way to do it. And I remember years ago, I got caught in a situation like that. And after that, I decided I had to figure out a way to do it. And I did. And it works out very well. But you have to discipline and do those drills and work on that. Because remember, this is an engine company emergency that's happening now. And, we're there to up everyone's safety, not to be in jeopardy ourselves. And so this is one of the most common things that can happen, is that fire wrapping around. And, it's a dangerous situation.
Totally agree.
All right. Well, before we wrap here, Ray, I know you're working on a little project. You always got your hands in a bunch of stuff. I was trying to bring it up right now while we were chatting. But you want to tell us about Pushing Fire, what Pushing Fire is?
Oh, yeah, sure. Pushing Fire is an endeavor. I'm collaborating with Eric Roden. Eric's a chief in the Milwaukee Fire Department, and he and I did Urban Firefighter magazine together in the past. And basically, it's just a website where we're asking friends of ours, and and if people want to, they can certainly contact us. It's easy enough to get in touch with me. And we're going to post some blogs and some tactical articles as well. We just want to be a space where we have good writers and that are writing about stuff that's important to the fire service. And that's kind of always been our guidepost when we had Urban Firefighter. I mean, it was wonderful. We had firefighters that would probably never write for Fire Magazine other than that. And that was nice. And it really brought a nice community together. And so we're just trying to recreate that a little bit. We've been kind of quiet about it, which is fine. We're not looking to take over. We just want to be a place where people can get some good, solid stuff. And that's our benchmark. As for work, we're in the final process of editing the FDNY Engine Company Procedure Manual. I've been working on that for quite a while with some other firefighters and company officers, and that's going to be finished very shortly. And that's just been something I've been working on for over a year, and that is really going to be great. We needed some updates. We did it. We put a lot of work into this endeavor, and I know it's going to be very beneficial to the firefighters in the FDNY, and I know there's plenty of good lessons that'll come out of it for other fire departments as well. So that's a nice thing to be working on as well.
Yeah, definitely. If guys want to check out Pushing Fire, how do they find it?
Oh, very simple. Just www.pushingfire.com, and that'll take you to the web page. And also what you basically want to do then is we'll put it on Facebook and stuff, but you can sign up for the direct email link. And what'll happen is once an article gets posted, you'll get it sent to your inbox, which is nice. And we're not overpowering anybody. You'll just get an email every once in a while. It's not a big deal. So
right.
We're not going to be a nuisance to anybody like some insurance companies are. I have one car insurance company that'll go unnamed. I should probably just go with them. Maybe they'd leave me alone then. I don't know.
Let me throw a couple of line bosses from my firehouse on. Thanks for being on there. But I'm noticing a lot of activity out of Champ. Mike Champo, so I'm just wondering if he's looking old time shift and he's covered on an engine tonight, or he's just fantasizing. But there's been a lot of discussion from Mike about engine work.
He's at home. He's at home growing a beard right now. That's probably what he's doing.
He actually helped me with one of our first videos we did together at Fire Engineering. We did the garage fire together, and whether you can tell or not, he's the firefighter outside using the 2.5 on the garage.
So
we go way back with that stuff.
My Bergen County buddy, love you. Ray, great job tonight. Absolutely wonderful stuff as always. I go back to my opening on you. It's a matter of depth and confidence and understanding at the firefighter level, and how that breeds to confidence at the company level, at the department level, and to better the fire service as a whole. These are firefighter one issues. I totally agree with you. I'm a bit of a dinosaur. Chris busts my chops. Everybody busts my chops about that. But in my meager experience, one of the things that I've always put a lot of value on is the ability of a firefighter to operate on his own, control his environment, because that's where it goes south. And our own personal responsibilities. So if you do not have a high sense of ownership to pursue training above what's being offered at the department level relative to this discipline, you're cutting yourself short, and it eventually will catch up. There's the sage wisdom from the OG.
All right. Well, Thanks,
Well,
guys.
I would just say that, the fire service in the last 10 years has really progressed. When I did my FDIC speech back in 2009 and talked about a culture of extinguishment, I would say I'm very proud with the way the American Fire Service has turned those words into reality. Every day we're seeing people trying new things, dissecting old things, adding to things, and the wheel of knowledge goes around and around, and there's a lot of people adding spokes to that wheel, and I'm just happy to be one of them.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. We will post this up on our YouTube channel if you missed it, or if you want to watch it again with your crew next week, in the future, whatever, it'll live there. As far as the Brass Tacks go, you can hit up BrassTacksHardFacts.com. That's where the library of videos live. Anything else you need will be at ElkhartBrass.com. We are pretty much on every social media platform out there. So, like I said last week, you're bored at home, you found the end of the internet, and you made a TikTok profile. We're there, baby. Check us out. And lastly, to remind everybody, Elkhart Brass are part of the Safe Fleet family. So we are part of the Safe Fleet Fire EMS and Industrial Group. You can check us out at safefleet.net/FEI. We're built up of the brands FRC, Foam Pro, ROM, and Elkhart Brass. So pretty much anything you need building a fire truck, spec'ing a rig, check out the site, hit us up with any questions. We're happy to help. And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate everybody.
Good night.
Good night.